The Roman Colosseum was a place where gladiators would fight to the death. But sometimes they wouldn't just fight each other. Instead, they might fight things like lions or bears. And in extreme cases, they almost had no chance at surviving. Today, we're gonna check out the top 10 most unfair fights in the Roman Colosseum history.
Let's start with the unfair and slowly work our way towards the most brutal matchups on the list. Number 10, blind fighters.
There's no actual way that they would do that. Hold on a minute. At least tell me that both fighters were blind, because if one was blind and the other was not, how is that even fun to watch? Because at the end of the day, the entire thing is a spectacle, and it was meant for people to be entertained. If both fighters were blind though, that actually, I could see that being pretty fun. Hang on, let's hear them out.
And Abadia were criminals who would be forced to fight completely blind. They would be given a straight sword and a helmet for protection. Except the helmet was practically a curse, since it was completely sealed off, preventing the fighter from seeing or hearing anything. The fight would begin as soon as the fighters were placed within close range of one another, with the most popular strategy being the swing and pray method, which in all honesty was the only strategy available. Now the good news is that judges weren't really needed for these fights, since the winners were very easy to identify, as they were the only contestants still breathing. Now the crazy part is that this spectacle was seen as comedic relief more than anything. And if you don't think two blind men fighting each other to the death is hilarious, well, you have a lot to learn about comedy.
I remember growing up, me and the boys, we would do like blindfolded pillow fighting. Anybody else, or is that just me? That was pretty fun. It is pretty messed up though that they would watch people literally die for entertainment. But hey man, not to defend them or anything, but back in the day, things were just different. It was a different society, different culture, and I don't agree with it obviously, but that's kind of just how things were. And I do kind of get blindfolding two guys is kind of funny.
Now, this might not sound that unfair at first, since both men are equally blind and equipped with the same weapon. But think again, since the winner of the match would typically be rewarded with another match.
Nah.
And another one.
Nah.
And another one.
What?
And another one. You get the point. As you can imagine, a winning streak never really lasted for very long.
I wonder if they had like different titles. Like in the UFC, they have like the heavyweight champion, for example. Would that dude be the blindfolded champion? And maybe he's like not worshipped, but like known around town as the blindfold king. That'd be pretty cool. But I also don't think that they are free. So I don't think that they would actually ever even really know if they were loved or not. But that could be cool. I think the best tactic would probably just be to stick your sword out and spin around in circles until you feel a little something, and then you start hacking and slashing.
Number 9, naval battles. There was nothing more epic than the naval battles of the Colosseum. Also, one of the most unfair, bloody, and expensive. The event would begin by filling the Colosseum with water in around a dozen ships. It's estimated that thousands of prisoners would participate in these events. But let's talk about what made these battles unfair. Now, depending on the starting position of your ship, it could determine your likelihood of survival.
Well, yeah, dude, if you're in the middle, that's so unfair. Like, you're just toast. Everyone's gonna target you. I also didn't know the Colosseums were so big that they could fit 12 ships in there. That's insane. I wonder if they were like small ships, like little kayaks. I would watch that. 12 people in kayaks battling to the death.
Well, at least for a bit longer, as the odds of survival were almost non-existent to begin with. Ships that started in between two other ships would make for an easy target, easily creating a 1v2 scenario. Prisoners would invade other ships, killing everyone that stood in their way, while others would simply use the more popular strategy we see today, which is of course running away from all fights and sneaking their way to the final round.
That's totally what I would do.
Steal the win with a single kill. The bloody fight would come to an end when there was only one ship or team remaining. As terrible as these battles were, at least they were easy to clean up. The Romans would try their best to remove all the large debris from the water before the stadium would be flushed like a giant toilet bowl, sending all the remains downstream for another town to deal with.
Bro, that's so sad.
Number 8.
Imagine like watching your dad in there, or your son, or like, I don't know how people became gladiators. I think it was mostly like slaves that ended up doing that. I don't think that there were many volunteers that wanted to be gladiators, but that would be so sad if you watched like someone you knew or loved be a gladiator, because I think it was like insanely hard to gain freedom from being a gladiator. Most of them probably died. About 99% of my knowledge on gladiators, by the way, is from the movie Gladiator. So that's where I'm getting all that info from, which probably the majority of that is made up. So what I'm trying to say is I know nothing about gladiators.
Gladiator fights. Gladiator fights were the single most popular matches of the Colosseum, with the good matchups typically being saved for the main event. Now, how can two gladiators fighting each other be unfair, you might ask? Well, for starters, the emperors weren't really interested in fairness, as their primary concern was entertainment. And with over 20 different classes of gladiators to choose from, the styles would be mixed and matched based on entertainment alone. Here are some of the most unfair and popular matchups. Retiarius versus Secutor. Retiarius were equipped with a net, a trident, a dagger, and minimal armor, while the Secutor was equipped with a sword, a large shield, a helmet, and heavy armor.
I'm gonna say the guy on the right has the big advantage. I don't really know what a net is gonna do against somebody with the shield and armor, but I could be wrong, because I'm an idiot.
Go ahead, pick one.
That guy.
If you chose the Secutor, well, GG's, you're dead, as the Retiarius just had to keep his distance and poke at the Secutor.
Wait, what? Hang on a minute, something don't feel right. Why is that guy, put your shield out? What do you mean he can keep his distance and poke him? That's what the whole shield is for, bro, what? Cause that dude with the shield and the sword, that's like a knight. And knights are like the strongest guys back then, I thought. And if the guy on the left with the little lasso and net and the little pokey was that strong, why was that not the way that they fought in war? Maybe because in war, it's like there's a swarm of people and it wouldn't be good against swarms, but it's good in 1v1 situations. I don't know, that don't seem right though.
Or better yet, trap him by throwing his net on him, giving him enough time to emote before poking him to death.
Bro.
All right, let's try another one. Murmillo versus Thorax.
Hang on a minute, hang on, let me think here, let me think. They didn't give me enough time to think last time. And a Murmillo, which has a shield and a sword and a helmet and an arm sleeve, against a guy with the exact same thing, except a smaller shield and like a, I don't know what that is, like a little dagger, curved dagger. I'm gonna say the guy on the left, he's got a bigger shield. Give me Murmillo.
Murmillo were armed with a large rectangular shield, a short sword, a helmet, and a metal or leather sleeve for protection, while the Thorax was equipped with a light shield, a curved sword, a helmet, and a metal or leather sleeve for protection.
Bro, it's like the same thing.
Go ahead, pick one.
Well, now he's making me second guess a little bit here. Hang on a minute. I'm gonna say, no, I'm gonna stick to my guns. I'm gonna go with the left guy.
If you chose the Murmillo, rip, you're dead.
What?
As the Thorax just had to tire out the Murmillo since he was carrying the heavier shield.
Oh my god, dude, what are we even talking about? How about the guy with the big shield doesn't like run around and not get tired? It's really not rocket science, just, you know what I'm saying? Or maybe put the shield down if it's that much of a hindrance. What are we talking about?
As you can see, stylistic matchups were a big deal and could easily influence the outcome of a fight. And I know this might come as a shock to some, but not all gladiator fights were to the death. A lot of fights would be called off when a fighter took heavy damage, since good gladiators were very expensive to replace.
Wait, hang on. This isn't what he just said. I was just thinking more about the big shield. In what case would having a big shield ever be better then? You know what I'm saying? Like, cause the guy's saying that it's matchup differences, which are the reason, but like, if it's true that having a big shield makes you tired so quick, then in what case is it good to have that? Who would ever have that? Obviously, it's not good against smaller shields. When is it good then? In what case? Maybe against an archer? That's all I can think of. Maybe. I don't... Dude, what are we talking about?
Number 7, animal battles. Humans were not the only ones to have unfair matchups inside of the Colosseum, since animals were also treated like criminals. They would be enslaved, pinned against each other, and humiliated, and were such a popular spectacle that at times, thousands of animals would be slaughtered in a given day.
This is maybe controversial of me, but I can see this being entertaining. Now, I'm not saying I would go and I wouldn't support it. Like, if there were animal fights happening today, obviously, I would be against that. That's cruel, and I love animals. However, like, I've always wanted to know who would win, a grizzly bear or a lion. I think a grizzly bear, but I don't know. You know, I would like to see that. Put a lion and a tiger in there. Let's mix and match. I want to see, like, who actually would win those fights. And there's a lot of fights that you don't actually get in Mother Nature, so we'll never know unless we actually make them do it. Again, I'm not saying I support it, but I am saying that I could see how that would be extraordinarily entertaining.
Which was completely unsustainable, driving many animals to to extinction. Here are some of the
Aw.
most popular and unfair matchups that were commonly seen in the Colosseum.
Let me see.
Elephant versus rhino.
Let me see if I can get these right. I'm gonna say that the elephant wins that, if it's a full-grown elephant.
One of the most famous Colosseum battles was when an enraged rhino was pinned against an elephant, with the elephant eventually winning when he decided to cheat by grabbing a spear with its trunk
No
and
way.
gouging the rhino's eyes
What?
out. Lion versus
No way,
tiger.
no way they're that smart. I didn't know that. I thought they could just use their tusks. Anyway, this one I think tiger wins because tigers are bigger than lions. But hey, this is what I was saying. Like I always wondered who, these are some interesting matchups.
This matchup is basically a robbery, as I'm sure the locals would have bet large amounts of money against the guys from out of town, since they knew that the lion always wins, with there only being one recorded incident of a tiger getting the best of a lion. Elephant versus bull. As you can
Wait, so who? I don't even know who won that. I'm so confused. Okay, clearly the elephant wins this too then.
imagine, when an animal has over 10,000 pounds on its opponent, it's not really going to be much of a fight, is it? But just to make matters worse, sometimes the elephant and the bull would be chained together,
Oh, jeez.
forcing the action. And no matter how the fight begins, it would always end with the bull being turned to soup.
Yeah, you
Really
just
quickly,
step
here are
on
some
him.
of the other animal fights that were very popular. Rhino versus bear.
I think that the... Gosh, I actually don't know who wins that. I would say... Well, the bear would be way more agile, but the rhino is so thick. I don't know if the bear could, do much damage to him. I'm gonna say the bear would win. No, that's silly. I'm gonna say the rhino was gonna win.
Rhino versus buffalo.
The rhino wins that.
Rhino versus elephant.
Elephant
Crocodile
wins.
versus hippo.
The hippo wins that. Dang, that hippo is... Are all hippos that thick? That boy is thick. My goodness gracious.
Tiger versus bear.
See, that's another good matchup, dude. I don't know. We went into this, the whole idea of this video was super unfair matchups. I don't know how this is unfair. Who wins that? I'm gonna say the grizzly bear wins, but grizzly bears are huge.
Bear versus bull. Bear
Bear.
versus wolf.
Bear.
Goro versus scorpion.
Who?
Lion versus bull. Lion,
Lion.
versus bear. Lion
Bear.
versus panther. Lion,
Lion.
versus chimp. Lion,
Lion.
versus hyenas.
Lion.
Versus basically any animal the Romans can get a hold of. Number 6.
Dude, some of those were close. I actually don't know who would win most of them. I totally, back in the day, would not have supported that. I would not have gone. I would have protested those fights and battles, and I totally would not have paid to see those battles go down. I would not be interested at all. Number 6.
1 versus 2. This matchup can be unfair for either side depending on the circumstances. Let me explain. There are 2 scenarios in which this matchup can take shape. 1. A high-level gladiator will take on 2 prisoners simultaneously, and as the prisoners try their best to figure out how to properly hold a sword, they will realize that it's very difficult to do so, since their hands are no longer attached. Now, the second scenario is a bit more fair. 3 well-trained gladiators were placed inside of the Colosseum. One gladiator would be given heavy armor and a good weapon, while his 2 opponents would receive minimal armor and worse weapons. The duo would need to work together to defeat the better equipped man, but being partnered up is not as easy as you might think, and does come with its own set of challenges, like knowing whether you should go for the res or attempt to clutch up when your partner inevitably goes down.
Can't res in this, right? You're down. What is he supposed to do? Kiss your boo-boo is better? What?
The last and final way that a gladiator can be outnumbered is during large-scale battles. This one is, of course, purely based on luck alone, and doesn't always mean that you will see a 1v2 matchup, as it just might be a 1v6 depending on how bad your team is. Number 5.
That's probably the scariest thing ever, when you know that you're cooked. There's just nothing you can do. There's just 6 dudes with swords and you're 1v6, and So it's so crazy that people actually live that life. It's one thing to learn about it in this video or read about it or watch movies on it, but to actually think that really happened and people were actually in those positions. It's crazy. Today, bro, you can be like me and play Minecraft for a living and react to videos, and that's what I do. But back then, people really were in it. They were really in the thick of it. They were really in those gladiator coliseums trying to 1v6. I can't believe that. I couldn't even imagine being in a position like that. I really don't know what I would do, man. I mean, I would die. That's what I would do. I would just die. I'd be dead. But it would just be so awful. I can't believe that that's even real. Number 5.
Woman versus dwarf. Emperor Domitian introduced...
Dude, that sounds like a great matchup. Not to be I wouldn't know who wins that. You know what I'm saying? Normally man versus woman, generally the man's gonna win in a fight. That's how that works. But what about a woman versus a little man? Now who wins?
Woman versus dwarf. And I have to admit, this is the only battle on the list where a clear winner was not well documented. But even with the little information we do have, I have a gut feeling that it just wasn't a fair matchup. matchup. I'm just not certain for whom. You see, on one hand, you have a fully grown woman who obviously has the reach advantage, while on the other hand, you have a male dwarf who is much stronger and obviously uses magic. How much stronger? Well, I'm not sure. I did, however, stumble upon this forum where a guy asked the same question back in 2011. Now, sadly, people just replied back with even more interesting questions that we will never get the answers to.
That's crazy.
And of course, naturally, the entire forum devolved into guys just bragging about how many dwarves they can take on at once. One of the—
Bro, I've seen some videos of dwarves being like insanely strong, like benching like 400 pounds. Those boys can be thick. But I think in a lot of these matchups, like it really just depends how well trained they are. Like if you have a dwarf that's well trained, I think it would beat a woman. If you have a woman that's well trained, it would be a dwarf that's not trained. You know what I'm saying? So like on paper, I think it's an even matchup and kind of just depends on their background. Am I being mean? I don't know.
Most bizarre things about this matchup was that Emperor Domitian liked to schedule this fight at night, since he preferred this battle when it was illuminated by torchlights. In 2010, a female gladiator's remains were found in England. After they were examined, it was concluded that the woman's legs and arm bones were unusually heavy, suggesting that she had strong muscles. You know, I was originally leaning towards the dwarf, but now I really don't see how they could possibly win.
Yeah, I mean, if the woman was like super strong and trained, she wins that for sure. What's number 4?
4. Wild animal hunts. Perhaps one of the most unique spectacles of the Colosseum was the wild animal hunts. Here, the entire Colosseum arena was made to resemble the animal's natural environment. A few men were then brought out to the arena equipped with small shields and weapons. Then for the next few minutes or hours, the arena would be slowly filled with terrifying predators. But if they really wanted to get the crowd on their feet, all the animals would be released at once. Sometimes the men who were fighting the lions, bears, and panthers would have been well-trained fighters, while other times they would have been condemned criminals who were just given the death sentence and stood 0 to no chance of winning. Here are some of the animals you could have expected to make an appearance: lions, tigers, bears, elephants.
See, literally any of those that he just listed, I don't think a human could beat. Even if you had a sword and shield, a lot of them, what do you do against a lion, man? Like, you have one chance to stab it. If you miss, like, it's gonna bite your neck and you're dead. And it has claws, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's fast. Like, I don't know, against an elephant too? What are you supposed to do? I think I would chop at its legs, but like, even still, that's crazy.
Rhinos, panthers, leopards, hyenas, wolves, boars, bulls, deers, ostriches, crocodiles, giraffes, camels, and shiprats.
Oh my God.
Of course,
Rats?
shiprats were not invited, but they showed up anyways. Number 3, man versus beast. Man versus beast matches were one-on-one battles and were the second most popular spectacle, only behind gladiator fights. Now, there were basically 2 ways that this matchup would be arranged, with both of them tailored for maximum entertainment for the crowd. The first one was when a professional slave or volunteer fighter known as a bestiarius would face off with a terrifying beast. The animal could be anything from a lion, leopard, tiger, bear, or any other large and powerful creature. These battles would typically end with the animal being defeated, even if the bestiarius took heavy damage. On the other hand, the second matchup was much more bloody and typically ended with the man being torn to pieces. Here, a criminal or prisoner of war would be forced to face off with the animal. With little to no training, it was only a matter of time before the man would become an anatomy lesson.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, bro, even if you give a man a sword and shield, a lot of those animals are still dicing them up.
And it definitely didn't help that the animals were starved for long periods of time before they were brought out, making them a lot more angry and aggressive. There was even a single lion that took out over 200 men before it was finally defeated.
Bro, what?
Which is obviously a padded record, since it clearly fought nothing but tomato cans. Oh, I should also mention, there is another event that was very popular and is somewhat related, where a criminal was tied to a stake, and then a wild animal would be released to eat him alive.
Bro, what?
You know, you would think that this would be one of those situations where if you've seen it once, then you've seen them all type of deal. But apparently, some emperors love to show this one quite often.
That must have been a form of like public execution, which I guess these all are, but that one in particular was probably more of a way for the emperor to show his power and kind of rule through fear over his people. Like, just to show his people like what he can do to you if you break the law. Because he's saying a lot of these people are criminals, more so than slaves even, which I found surprising. Like, normally I feel like if you're a criminal, you go to jail, but if you're a slave, like, I don't know, I guess you turn into a gladiator. But no, if you're back in those days, if you broke the law, like let's just say you stole a loaf of bread, you could literally be put into a coliseum and have to fight a lion the next day. That is absurd. And I'm just saying, I think that the one where he like ties them up and they just get eaten is probably more so a form of expressing his dominance rather than like entertainment for the people.
Prisoner versus professional gladiator. Easily one of the most unfair matchups of the Colosseum was when prisoners would face off against a professional and seasoned gladiator. The professional gladiator could have been a slave himself with many fights under his belt, or a volunteer gladiator that was part of one of the many gladiatorial schools. Either way, the criminal with 0 to no experience was basically sentenced to death. You see, what could be worse than being invaded, enslaved, and kept inside of a cell for days, just to be given a weapon you have never used, then pushed to the center of the Colosseum floor, only for Spartacus to make his walkout shortly after you. Number 1.
Yeah, I mean, that's so not, that's like in the UFC, for example, if you just take some guy off the street and put him up against Francis Ngannou. Yeah, like, oh, that's fair. You totally stand a chance. I do feel like, though, if you have swords, you have a better chance against a professional than if it's just like fist fighting, because I think in fist fighting, you can get less lucky. I don't know, I just feel like with a sword, like, you just need one good slash and you can win. But in a fist fighting, like, if you're fighting Francis Ngannou, like, you're cooked, bro. Like, there's nothing, there's no way. There's 0% chance you win.
Rigged fights. What could be more unfair than rigged matches? Emperor Commodus was definitely the worst offender when it came to rigged matches. The emperor ruled Rome from 180 to 192 AD and was even portrayed by Joaquin Phoenix in the 2000 film Gladiator.
Yeah, that's the movie I was talking about. That movie's awesome, bro. If you haven't seen it, you gotta see it. I mean, it's pretty old now, so if you're younger, then you might not have seen it, but it actually is a lot of people's all-time favorite movie. It's pretty awesome. But I was about to spoil what's gonna happen, but I'm gonna see if he does first, because I don't want to be the one to spoil it. But he might spoil it.
Commodus was obsessed with becoming a famous and well-respected gladiator. So much so that he would even compete himself. Well, if you could even call it that. An emperor fighting as a gladiator was unheard of. Now, of course, Commodus had the best training in all of Rome and was actually very talented with the sword. But that wouldn't stop him from rigging fights by secretly injuring men just moments before they were brought out to face him. His opponents were injured in a way that could be concealed under their armor, but be devastating enough to hinder their performance or make a limb unusable. Another strategy that the emperor would use was simply fighting men with 0 to no experience, making for another easy W. Emperor Commodus would have the longest undefeated record as a gladiator.
I mean, to be fair, if you get defeated as a gladiator, you might die. And as the emperor, you can't die. So like, on one hand, like, yes, he's a coward for only taking easy fights and rigging the fights. That's very cowardice of him. But on the other hand, it's like, well, what is he gonna do? Like, is he really gonna fight the best guys in the world when he is the emperor of Rome? Like, he can't die doing that. That would be so ridiculous. Really, the best thing for him to do would just not fight at all. But I understand the idea of like, if he's going to fight, then he has to win. That would be so ridiculous if he didn't win.
And it's suspected that he competed hundreds of times. He would also charge the Roman treasury around 25,000 pieces of silver every time he competed. There are many things you can call Emperor Commodus, but one thing you can't say is that he ever discriminated, since animals were also injured and threatened to face him. Apparently, he killed hundreds of lions, ostriches, some giraffes, and on one occasion, even killed 3 elephants that were just laying on the floor.
Yeah,
now, as horrible as this all sounds, this was all just a warm-up. And in November of 192 AD, he held the Polybian Games, a festival that lasted around 2 weeks. There, Commodus shot hundreds of animals with arrows and javelins every single day. But if it makes you feel any better, 1 month after the Polybian Games, Commodus would be strangled to death inside of his bathtub by a professional wrestler named Narcissus. Which, for a man, that has to be the most embarrassing way to be found dead. Completely naked inside of a cold tub. You can't even explain your way out of that one.
Wait, I didn't know he died that way. That kind of sucks. Not that he was a good guy, deserved better, but that sucks. Anyway, that's it for today. If you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe, and click here for more.